Well, hello everybody. I was out riding my bike the other day, yesterday actually, on Sunday, and I stopped for a some water and I sat down for a bit and I turned on the camera and I was talking about these books I've recently read and how they kind of support the way I think about the world in different ways, my worldview, as it were. And of course, as I've said before, I'm a overshootologist, not really professional one, but you know what I mean. A collapsologist. And that doesn't mean I'm a doomsayer, a doom person, or anything like that. I don't want anything to do with doom. I want to enjoy my life, and I want other people to enjoy my life. And I want to see a world where there's a great deal less human suffering and a great deal less ecological destruction. Ecocide, genocide, no. War, forget about it. It's a waste of energy, a waste of materials, a waste of life. It's destructive, it's ecocidal, it's madness. There's no point in it at this juncture, at this moment in history. We are literally approaching collapse faster and faster because everything in our culture, our global culture, is accelerationist in the sense that it accelerates all the existential threats and all the things and feedbacks that exacerbate collapse. And I'm talking about ecological collapse in particular, not being able to have enough energy to feed 8 billion people, and so on. It's a bad thing, and it's something we're not paying attention to, primarily because we're wealthy, and we're well fed and well entertained, and we're comfortable, so we're not thinking about these things at all. We're just indulging ourselves, which is pretty normal, actually, for us, for our species. A very weird, unique, unusual species that emerged over time through evolution. And all of our narratives going back to before the Enlightenment, all the way back to Plutarch or Socrates or whoever you want to point a finger at, Egyptians, Persians, it doesn't matter, Chinese sages. There have been stories about expansionism and conquest and magic and all that kind of thing. We're just storytelling creatures, and we're true believers. We like to believe stories. Once we're comfortable with a story, we can't let it go. It becomes dogma. It becomes doctrinal. And we tend to adhere to it because it's comfortable for us. And it's part of our community, which means we fit into it socially, culturally, and so on. We can't pull ourselves away from it. So in terms of overshootology, I've mentioned this book before, but Escape from Overshoot: Economics for a Planet in Peril, by Peter A. Victor, sorry. So it's interesting to look at economics, even if you believe that there's nothing we can do about anything, because it's too late or whatever. People do think about different ways of living on this planet. Inevitably, billions of us are going to die of starvation very soon. And that's going to change a lot of dynamics on the planet. Researchers have done studies in how quickly environments rewild once we're gone, you know. So once the demand for energy is taken away because of a lower population and because it's more and more difficult to get the low-hanging fruit, oil and gas and so on and so forth, minerals, and basically diesel fuel, things will start to bounce back. Carbon will be sequestered. Things will shift around. But we don't know how long. A lot of scientists think that the global warming that we have locked into the planetary, system at the moment will last 1,000 years. So it's not clear that if we disappeared tomorrow as a species and stopped using energy, first of all, there'd be a spike in global warming for various reasons, the global masking effect and other things, which would have devastating impacts on living systems. But even if things bounced back, it would take thousands of years. And who knows how things are going to look 10, 20, 100,000 years from now. Who knows? And who cares? If you're driving a Lamborghini and, on the way to the yacht club to get on your yacht for a Mediterranean cruise, why would you give a shit about any of this? And people who are just normal people care more about culture wars and their ideology, their religious beliefs, their economic beliefs, whatever it is they've been conditioned to believe, than anything else. And most of us are addicts, so we want to watch television, Netflix, we want to play video games, and we want to take drugs and drink alcohol and indulge in just habits that we have, whether it's playing solitaire for 5 hours a day or, obsessing on CrossFit or, whatever it might be, your thing, your hobbies, your focus, your obsessions. We're all addicts to one thing or another. Most of us to multiple things. We don't even know it. And of course, we are human beings. We're biological animals, and we have endocrine systems, and all of these things interact with the environment and with the culture as well. It's interesting, the intersection between anthropology, cultural anthropology, biology, medicine, science, the environment, all these things, like thinking about having a plastic fork, that amount of microplastics in your brain, that people who died in 2024, they did some research and they discovered that we have tons of microplastics in our bodies, endocrine disruptors, forever chemicals, PFAS, whatever. These things are in the environment. Genies are out of the bottle. We can't get rid of them overnight. It's never going to happen. So we've overshot on so many levels. And I talked about hospicing modernity before, where you're, Vanessa Machado de Oliveira, nice name. So just facing our sins and what the implications for social activism is. I don't think many of us are going to be activists, as I said when I sat down on my bike ride, until we're starving to death or close to it, or we can see the starvation coming. We're feeling it. So thinking that the next Democratic president of the United States is going to make everything cheaper, just like Donald Trump was supposed to do, is a fool's errand. It's silly. Modernity as we know it, civilization as we know it, is on its way out. And that's purely a physics calculation and a biological calculation. Everything in our current global civilization is based on energy, oil. So before I move on to these books, let me just start this screen recording here. And I will, let me see here. I will walk you through some of The Honest Sorcerer, his stuff that he posted the last couple of weeks. So the first one is this piece, Collapse 2 might come sooner than expected. And it's a very good article. I won't go through all of it, but he's just looking at the energy connection with collapse. Liquid fuels, how important they are. Refining these things, refining rare earths requires energy. China's development required lots and lots of steel, which required lots and lots of coal. China produces more coal than Europe and the United States, and where else? Choose another place. Russia combined. And it produces a lot of steel and a lot of other stuff with that coal. The coal must be burned. It must be dug out of the earth. It needs machines that run on diesel fuel. There are not going to be any electric mega trucks running on hydrogen or something, or tiny little fusion generator packs. This is fantasy, science fiction. The engineering isn't there. The physics doesn't bear it out. The science doesn't bear it out. And we don't have enough materials to scale up the kind of economic growth we're used to based on those energy sources. So he goes through all of that. It's a great article. I highly recommend it. A self-powered energy supply and use system which is available to deliver a net surplus of energy is vital for any civilization to develop and thrive. A basic thing. All the McMansions and football stadiums and all the cool little things, the cars and the electric cars all depend on these biodiesel and food, uranium, rare earth, silicon, alternative energy. It all needs more oil to come about, and coal powered, power plants and so on. So that's a great article. And then the more recent one, he's talking about why electric vehicles can't reduce overall oil demand. Because the more vehicles we have, the more oil we're going to need to make those components for those electric vehicles. And because of Jevons paradox, it will increase demand for oil anyway. So probably hybrid cars would be a better thing if we were transitioning to something, and we're not. The green transition is fake. It's marketing and PR. And only the players are taking advantage of this and getting wealthy through capital on capital returns. And you're not. Nothing you do is going to help you, because you weren't born with the advantages necessary to become uber rich. And if you're not uber rich by now, 30-year-old or whatever, you most likely will never be. I mean, the odds are huge. So buy a lottery ticket. At least you'll have those odds, right? So he goes through points about electric vehicles and so on. EVs take more minerals, nickel, cobalt, graphite, copper, etc. All of this requires diesel to get. Cheap fuel is harder to get now. It's costing more money, EROEI, and so on. Do we have enough metal reserves to give everyone an electric car and replace the battery pack every 10 or 12 or 15 years? Anyway, the world's going to be way past 2 degrees above the pre-industrial baseline within the next 15 years, I think. So all bets are off. I mean, how are we going to deal with things when habitats are being destroyed left, right, and center? And all of that impacts us, our ability to feed ourselves. So there's going to be a radical simplification, whether you like it or not. Degrowth's going to happen, whether you like it or not. But in these articles, he talks about just this mad and crazy panic that will occur because we're not planning for any of this. None of our leaders care about any of this shit. They care about their jobs, their careers, their status, the money required to keep their jobs and status. And they will sell out to anybody to do that. The whole warfighter mentality in the United States is based on global hegemony, based on empire. It's just based on neocolonialism, this tried and true colonial bullshit, divide and conquer, the use of proxies to fight its battles. And it's all about control of resources. I saw a documentary the other day about surviving the Battle of Mogadishu or surviving Black Hawk Down. Three-part series. They talked to, Army Ranger people. They talked to Delta Force people, but they also talked to mothers, to teachers, to fighters who were fighting for Aidid at the time, and just kind of highlighting the anger that the Somalis had towards Americans for being there. Now, you have to question, why were we there in the first place? Well, the Delta Force, the Army Rangers, are not ever coming to Portugal. That's why I live here, because they don't give a shit about olive trees. I've said that many times, and they really don't. So they're in Mogadishu because, oh shit, I should pause this damn thing, this screen recording. Yeah, I'll stop it here because I'm rambling now, and I'll make another one in a minute. They're in Mogadishu because of the rare earths, because of the minerals, because of the oil, because of the strategic significance of the Horn of Africa, because of all these things that interest the U.S. hegemon. That's why America has bases all around the world. That's why it uses Ukraine to fight Russia. It wants control over Russia's resources, Ukraine's resources. It doesn't want China to have those things. It doesn't want to compete with China on any level. And all of the nonsense about ideology or the Communist Party or who's a dictator or is Putler a bad guy or a good guy, all of this shit doesn't really matter. And you can find rationalizations and reasons for any of this. And I'll go into that. That's why I wanted to make this video in a second. But they're there for that reason, not because they care about the famine there that they triggered again after they left, or the civil war that they triggered by trying to control those resources. Some warlords and leaders didn't want this particular American control. They had deals with other people around the world. And so they started fighting over these, and they're still doing it. Central Africa is a mess. And all the superpowers and major powers or alliances are there trying to take advantage of the resources for economic growth, for capital on capital returns, not for you, my friend, not for you, but for those who have had the advantage to take advantage of that, probably since they were born. And all of the service providers that went to Yale and Harvard and Stanford and all the business schools, INSEAD and McKinsey and whatever, who are the service providers for all these people who are shoveling financialized capital into their own pockets so that they can buy up resources. They're not stupid people. They know collapse is coming. They know that the U.S. hegemon is under threat. They understand it, and they're preparing. You don't have the resources to do that. But if you educate yourself and prepare yourself emotionally and intellectually, and of course financially and in any other way you can, for what's happening right now, it might just be a little bit easier for you. And besides that, it's a fascinating subject. So what can I say? Very interesting. The whole thing. So that's that. I wanted to highlight those two articles. And then another book that I'm listening to, the audiobook right now, The West, A New History of an Old Idea by Nuaz McSweeney. And it's really interesting. She talks about how our concept of Western civilization is wrong and useless at the moment, this time in history. And she does it through telling the story of various people throughout history. And it's very, very interesting to frame it in that way, through the eyes, through the lives of these historic figures. And they're not the most famous, powerful ones either. And I find it really fun. But today I'm going to talk about these three books that I think kind of blend together to give you a good idea about how things work, where we got our ideas and our beliefs from, and why it matters, and what it means moving forward. We either accept it, which is business as usual, which is accelerationism, which is earlier arrival at chaos and madness and pain, or whether we try to exercise some agency, whatever agency we can scrape together in our communities to slow this damn thing down, fire the leaders we have now, and try to make a cultural shift. I'm not saying we can do this. We may have evolved into this kind of creature that just can't do that. We're just incapable. There are not enough slow thinkers out there who are important. And people don't like complexity. They don't want to think about things too much. They'd rather follow the memes and so on. So yeah, perhaps we're just not that kind of creature, and extinction is the rule. And so what? Who knows when this is really going to get nasty for people in Amsterdam or people in some small city in the UK or in Japan or wherever. So why not just continue doing what you do because you have to anyway? And we're totally dependent on this type of modern techno-industrial financialized civilization anyhow. We can't get away from it. And they're going to tokenize it, they're going to digitize it, they're going to use AI, and there are going to be fraud schemes and all kinds of nasty shit going on. That it's just a way to rob us more. And people who know how these systems work are going to take advantage of them, and they are going to rob ordinary people, plebs and proles. And they're going to fuck you over and over again. And most of us are going to bend over and say, thank you, more please. Because we've been trained to pay attention to, adhere to our dogmatic beliefs rather than to try to, in a kind of metacognitive way, analyze our own thinking and see if it really makes sense and if there isn't a better way of doing things and being. And of course, there are many paths up the mountain, and lots of things can be helpful, whether it's specific kinds of exercise, you taking care of your sleep, eating good food, reading the Tao Te Ching, or understanding the New Testament in a literary critical way or in a mythological sense, or having just being into literature or nonfiction or whatever, educating yourself. There's so many things one can do that can make things more interesting and healthier as we go along into this mad unraveling, which is look, it's accelerating. It's going faster and faster. We're not getting rid of nuclear arms. We're making it absolutely necessary for countries like Iran and Russia and other places around the world, North Korea and whatever, to have nukes, because it's the only way they can possibly defend themselves from America basically wanting to control all their shit. Now, China wants to control shit too. They just do it in a different way. They don't have the military capability that the United States does, so they're not as coercive in that sense. And it doesn't matter if you like or dislike their way, their system of government. You don't know anything about it. You'd have to study it and understand it. And you don't want to do that. So why do you care? I've lived in China for years and years, driven all over the country, worked with Chinese people, in Taiwan, mainland China, and Hong Kong. And I can tell you, it's just a place with a lot of people in it. People are people. Yeah, different cultures, there are differences, and languages, and so on, outlooks, worldviews, and beliefs, and so on. But it's just human beings. And we're pushing, the United States is pushing everybody into a defensive posture where they have no choice because they might want to maintain their sovereignty and independence than to oppose the United States. And the US, for many reasons, will never tolerate that. And a lot of it is religiosity. A lot of it is enlightenment born thinking and economic belief systems and so on. It's supremacy. And you can start with human supremacy, and then you can go to identity, like the West, like the book about the West. What does that mean? How do you identify your national identity as superior? USA, USA. Or you can go to white supremacy, or you can go to Baptist or Catholic or Orthodox or whatever supremacy. There are layers and layers and layers of that onion that you can peel back. And you can have layers of feeling supreme. A lot of the reasons why the U.S. gets into quagmires like Mogadishu is because it has this hubris, this arrogance, that it's there for the right reasons. It's indoctrinated all of its soldiers to believe that they're doing good and that they're necessary and that they're fighting for a greater purpose and they're part of a big, grand scheme that's important. And these people think they're invincible because they're number one. The Army Rangers are the best. The Special Forces are the best. The SEALs, the Delta Force. And, they're the best trained, the best equipped, the best armed, best tactics and all this stuff. But the soldiers don't realize is they're not working for their commander or their sergeant or their lieutenant or their general or the Pentagon or the general staff. These people are subordinate to the politicians, and the politicians are freaking idiots. Donald Trump is the commander-in-chief of the United States military? For God's sake, the guy can hardly think. He's inarticulate. He never reads. He doesn't know shit. He's a mess. And he's the guy who's playing the game. He can't play checkers. He doesn't know how to play chess, much less three-dimensional chess. And he's innumerate. He's an ignoramus. And most of the idiots in Congress are just dumbass ideologues who haven't learned anything since they were 25, probably. And they're just careerists. Kowtowing to their donors to keep their job and status, period. And that's why you're in Mogadishu. It's for the corporations. It's for the East India Company or the Dutch East India Company or whatever. And those are historical examples. United Fruit, there's a million of them. And they're working for that. That's why Schmedley wrote that book called War is a Racket, because he figured it out when he was massacring people in the Philippines. And now the United States is grooming the Philippines to be a proxy against China. So the Filipinos are going to die en masse if there's a war. They're also trying to create a conflict in Taiwan because most Taiwanese don't want a conflict. Most Chinese don't want a conflict. But they're trying to gin that up because their faction isn't in power right now. When I was in Hong Kong and they had the pro-democracy movement, this was all ginned up by NGOs and other groups selling the fantasy of flea dumb and democracy with their propaganda outlets like Apple Daily and other ones. And everybody just reads this shit, this copy, this marketing, this propaganda, this PR bullshit, and think that under some special US-based narrative, everything's going to be just so much better. And no, we're not part of China. We're still part of the British Empire. No, you're not. Not since 97. And, Taiwan's always been a part of China anyway, and it's not a country. It's not in the UN. It's not a country. It's not seen as a country by anyone in the world. And yet the United States wants to defend some province. And somebody made a good point that you can imagine if after the Civil War, the American Civil War, I forgot the name of the island, but there's an island off Corpus Christi or wherever in Texas where the leaders of the Confederacy went to regroup because they didn't really want to give up. They didn't want to honor the outcome of the Civil War. And so imagine if China came along and said, we're going to recognize you and we'll protect you if the United States government wants to come down and beg to differ with your efforts to destabilize the United States of America. What would happen? It's so absurd. So you're taking fleets halfway around the world. America's never been invaded. Not well. You had the revolution, right? There haven't been any invasions of America, and but we have to be out causing trouble everywhere. Why Iraq? Why Afghanistan? You have to ask those questions. What resources do they want to control? The U.S. corporations, the financial system. Financial services is a huge driver of wealth, and people, have a big stake in it. So why? Why are they there? Every time ask yourself, South Africa, apartheid, blah, blah, blah. Who cares? I mean, back in the day, the Dutch and the Brits and everybody needed things down there, but just let the thing drag on. Why would you want to boycott and divest South Africa just because of apartheid and all that stuff? But it died eventually, and now people are suddenly concerned about Palestinians because even conservative UFC fighters like Sean Strickland just probably find it very uncomfortable to look at starving children. And when you know that the starvation isn't coming because of famine, but is coming because of this conflict, which is wholly supported by U.S. weapons and finance, and you just kind of shake your head and say, "No, I don't want to be a part of this. This isn't what I voted for." And then they turn against Donald Trump, that they blindly love because he's cool or something. I don't know. But anyway, there's a big shift now. And on the liberal side, it's just a matter of Democrats wanting to not be seen as bad guys later on when their career ends, They just want to protect their reputations. They don't give a fuck. They're playing the game just like the Republicans are in the same bloody way. And, Republicans are more reactionary. They're conservative, all that kind of stuff. Of course, there's a difference. But the overall structured game, systemic game, is global finance and global control over resources. And America's really good at doing that through propaganda and marketing and public relations. They're extremely good at it on all fronts. And they're able to create buy-in. So you think of all these proxy warriors in Asia, whether it's going to be Australia's going to kick in and Japan's going to kick in, and South Korea's got millions of people in the military, and they're going to kick in, and the Taiwanese and the Philippines, well, they all get killed, wiped out, blown up. Who gives a fuck? At least Americans don't have to go. We were 20 years in the Middle East. It didn't work out too well for us at the end of the day. We lost 5,000, 6,000, whatever it was, soldiers, killed 1 million people, big deal. It's just, it's just war. So the guys in Mogadishu, they're upset. The wives of the casualties, 18 people dead, 75 to 90 wounded Americans during that conflict, at least 750 dead and thousands wounded, and most of them civilians in Mogadishu. Water off a duck, you know? I mean, they're using human shields. I just kill everybody. Well, you're in their city. Their city is populated with men, women, and children. It's crowded. And you're flying the choppers around using Gatling guns to suppress fire from what? And people get pissed. They get pissed. They start shooting back. So immediately 18 people get killed and Clinton pulls out. And then some of the soldiers are pissed because they wanted to stay and win. They were taught to win. They were taught they were the best. They were taught they were there for good reasons. They were taught they were doing the right thing. They were conditioned to believe all of this. And pulling out after losing their friends is just uncomfortable. It doesn't feel good. But later on, after 10, 20 years, they start to think, well, looking back, it doesn't feel good about those women and children that I shot during the chaos of battle. And I have to deal with that for the rest of my life. Thank you very much. And the United States isn't supporting the veterans the way they should, especially not in terms of health care and mental health care. So it's a tough pill to swallow. And of course, we're just thinking about how can people be so mean as to kill our soldiers when we're fucking blowing up their city. And you have examples of this in Iraq and other places. But the U.S. is clever on how it destroys countries and creates regime change and shifts from one faction to another. How they're now backing terrorist groups that they supposedly don't like in Syria. And it's strategic. It's this idea of choking off the world and saying, you're either with the United States of America or against us, period. And if you're against us, you're going to suffer. All the bloody tariffs and sanctions and all the shit with the World Bank and everything like that. These are just aspects of an overall mentality that believes it's divinely inspired to control the whole world. And if you're not down with that, you're satanic. And we have to do everything in our power to fight that. So you have all this rhetoric for years about how communism is satanic. Billy Graham was ecumenical in many ways, and he knew every president in the United States when he was alive. And yet he was like so anti-communist. Now, what happens when communism goes away? And you got like these socialist countries, Vietnam and China and Russia and so on, that are kind of doing pretty good, getting competitive and useful in a way, labor arbitrage and whatnot. And then, but they get uppity and they start wanting sovereignty and they start wanting to do things their own way and whatnot. Oh, you can't have that. So the Satan, of communism is gone and it's replaced with Putler or the Chinese Communist Party and how evil they are. China's never going to invade Taiwan. America's going to make sure that something happens to provoke China to fight over Taiwan, and they'll kick it off. And even if they don't, they're going to use this as a pretext to rob you, to tax your ass, to take your money and your assets, to surveil you, to control you more and more and more, while they use forever wars and all this bellicose posturing as a bait and switch distraction, while they just take everything. They want everything. The players who know what's going on, they are greedy motherfuckers. They don't care about you. And they're going to get everything they can. And You're going to sit back and wonder what the heck happened. Why are groceries so expensive? I don't get it. How come we don't all have electric cars now? What happened to oil and gas? Oh, you mean we don't have infinite resources on a finite planet? You mean Elon Musk can't send billions of starships up to Mars to terraform it into Earth 2 or whatever? What happened to the ecosystem? What happened to the soil? What happened to all these species of flora and fauna that we've killed? They don't just come back. You can't just genetically engineer them. You can't just clone them from DNA you find in bone marrow, and then suddenly we're all eating cheeseburgers made from mastodon meat. Hell no, it doesn't work that way. If you studied biology even a little bit and physics a little bit, you'd understand that. But we don't want to do that because it's complex. Easier to believe shit. So I wanted to put these 3 books together that I read recently. Now, I've read Thomas Piketty. This is the first big tome that he put out, Capital in the 21st Century, and it's a lot about taxes and inequality and how to make things better for people by doing things a little bit differently. It's not going to solve overshoot, nothing like that, but it's full of data, good arguments. It's an important book. It's really thick. Who's going to read it? Not many people. Curious people like me will read it because I'm curious and I feel ignorant and I think I should know something about this shit. So I read it. It's like 600 pages and then all the notes, 500 pages and then 100 pages of notes and references. It's mind-boggling. So anyway, the new one is Capital and Ideology, and it kind of continues with that. And I was just thinking about, how he employs the term ideology, so a set of priori plausible ideas and discourses, narratives, okay, describing how society should be structured. So they're structured all this, and these are story driven, and they're based on ideas that are there before. So if you haven't learned anything since you were 25, how are you going to update your priors in a Bayesian way and become a smarter guy? Not going to happen. So I'm not going to go into detail with this on this video because it's 44 minutes already and there's 3 books I want to talk about. So I'm just going to say in the next video I'm going to talk about Thomas Piketty's Capital and Ideology and how that relates to, he has this RG dynamic. So the rate of return on capital, this includes all income from wealth such as profits, dividends, interest, and rent. It represents how fast capital, assets like land, stocks, and real estate, grows over time. Piketty argues that historically R has averaged around 4 to 5% annually. G, the rate of economic growth. This is the rate at which the country's total income or output grows. It's the sum of a country's productivity growth and its population growth. Piketty argues that G has historically been much lower than R, often around 1 to 2% in developed countries. And this amplifies existing wealth. Capital owners who are typically the wealthiest can reinvest the returns from their capital, causing their wealth to compound and grow at the rate of R. Stagnating labor income, the majority of the population relies on labor income, which is tied to the slower rate of economic growth, G. And then the rentier class. Over time, the wealth of capital owners, the rentiers, grows faster than the overall economy. This means that an ever larger share of total wealth and income accumulates at the top, increasingly wealthy. It helps the wealthy. So it increases inequality. So the other book I've just I read and I really like. It's another huge book. It's not apologetics like Steven Pinker's 3 books for business as usual, the Enlightenment, Enlightenment Now, and Better Angels of Our Nature, which is just apologetics for, hey, look at how great everything is. White guys like me in rich countries shouldn't complain because everything's really good, and someday all of African people and all Indian people and whatever are going to be just as happy. You'll see, because all these ideas are great and they work and they've made people rich. So there's no overshootology, not much. He alludes to some. There's no limits to growth, not much. He alludes to some. It's more just apologetics for a certain worldview that's pretty much taken apart by that book about Western civilization that I talked about earlier. And this is a really great book. If you're interested in the Enlightenment, 1680 through 1790, it's so fascinating. And I love Enlightenment thinkers. I love them. They're so interesting. I even love 20th century economic thinkers like Hayek. They're just so bloody clever and at telling their stories and making arguments, and I find them fascinating. And of course, what they describe works in certain circumstances, but it's magical if you compare it to the reality of physics and biology. But ideologically, it's fascinating. So anyway, all of these guys are interesting. Francis Bacon said, torture nature to extract its secrets and bound into service, making her a slave. So it's just like control nature. And Rene Descartes, his philosophy, treating nature as a passive, as an object that is separate from man, right? So it's just something there, a machine to be reformed and used for our happiness. And living spiritual presence to a utilitarian means to an end. So, anyway, I'll go over this in more detail next time. So Friedman, the next one is Benjamin M. Friedman's book, Religion and the Rise of Capitalism. There's a couple books, Religion and the Rise of Capitalism. One's a classic and was written a long time ago. This one's more recent one, and he focuses a lot more on how we started thinking in terms of Adam Smith and things like that. It's a very good book, and he looks at the conflict between Calvinism and Protestantism, Reform, and he makes a comparison between Calvinism and Arminianism. So Arminian theology rehabilitates the belief in human innate goodness, moral agency, and conceived of a utilitarian God who valued human happiness. So the whole thing about the Enlightenment is flourishing human happiness. It's all kind of like a Sam Harris type thing. We make people happier and flourishing. They need lots of stuff to do that. They need a couple cars. They need to use a lot of energy to flourish. None of this wishy-washy shit about indigenous lifestyles and hunter-gatherers. So that's a fascinating connection. So the free market system basically was divinely inspired. It's God's will. And so you're doing the Lord's work if you're making money. And coming into the 50s, after World War II, and the 60s, the resurgence of a certain kind of conservatism, William F. Buckley Jr. and stuff like that, is fascinating. And then the anti-communist stuff, it all fits together beautifully, very nicely. So if markets were essential to enabling society to function so as to foster human happiness, they must therefore be a creation of an actively benevolent God. So God's acting in your life, wants you to be rich, prosperity, gospel, and so on. As opposed to millenarianism, apocalypticism, as opposed to the Calvinism, which basically says that you're flawed, you're depraved, you're predestined, you're either chosen or not chosen, and blah, blah, blah. And they're constantly waiting for the end of the world. There's nothing you can do about it. So we should be productive, and we should, work hard, and we should enjoy the fruits of this beautiful earth that we have. And, for me, it's like the fall, Adam and Eve. It's just when we figured out how to use nature, and we developed tools, a certain kind of consciousness, language, the ability to make tools to domesticate fire and animals and eventually ourselves. This gave us the power to become expansionist, and like some people have argued, philosophers and other people, our species like, as opposed to K species. And that's another thing that I weave into this particular thing. So those three books, and then you have the R and K thing that my friend Eric Lee likes to talk about a lot. He's obsessed with that. It's like, yeah, okay, we know human nature kind of in a way. We can talk about it through Robert Sapolsky's thing, and whether we have free will or not. We can discuss R and K and whatever. But we're here, and we want to do things. We want to use things. And we want to be happy, and we want to, be vain and beautiful and well-loved and all that stuff I talked about in my other video. So we're going to do something one way or another. So what are we going to learn about while we're alive now? And what are we going to do with that knowledge? Anything? If not, that's fine. Just continue doing what you're doing until the panic sets in. Because none of us are going to escape circumstances, the mean, evil dictator circumstances. So, so this hyper-capitalism, R&G thing creates a system with an intrinsic drive for endless growth. Friedman's work further explains how this relentless drive is ideologically fueled by a faith in unending economic growth, rooted in a theological optimism that assumes benevolent outcomes for market expansion. K species to an R species, that requires careful interpretation within the sociological context, as direct biological application to human societal evolution is problematic and has been associated with scientific racism. What that, it's just that when you start to say sociological things, cultural things are biologically determined, you get into that racist problem, right? It's like, I'm not going to go there right now, but you've probably noticed writers who talk in those terms, what the Asiatics are good at, and what the dark races are better at, and what the Northern Europeans and so on. And it's genetic. It's a bell curve, that kind of thing. So, but there is a lot of science behind observing this in biology and evolution and so on. So in a cultural kind of sense, if you want to couch it that way, our selected species exhibit short lifespans, produce numerous offspring with minimal parental care, and thrive in unstable environments, often displaying boom and bust population dynamics. K species are long-lived, produce fewer offspring with extensive parental care, and tend to stabilize near their environment's carrying capacity in stable conditions. So it's all about carrying capacity, and we're in overshoot now, so that's problematic. So all these kind of perspectives blend in together, weave in together, and you start to get a more nuanced, more detailed, more refined understanding of what it is we're committed to, even though we don't know we're committed to it. Like, I'm an atheist. I don't have any influences from Christianity, except that our Enlightenment thinking has deep roots in all kinds of religion and in particular Christianity or monotheist religions and so on. So that's a thing. And yeah, so maybe I'll go into that in more detail some other time. I will read you something I said to a friend on Substack. As I said in my other videos, I like Eric Michaels a lot, and I think he's a good person to follow if you're interested in understanding what we're experiencing now and what's not going to go away, what we're magically not going to be able to avoid, which is collapse. We're in overshoot. That's that. 8 billion people, harder to take care of than you think. And technology and engineering isn't going to magically fix us. There's a great literature, a huge community out there in the scientific community as well as philosophic and bloggers and so on discussing that side of it, whether or not science, engineering, and technology can save us. All these clever people just take away all the regulation, and we're going to have this beautiful technotopia. And talking about people at the New York Times like Ezra Klein and so on. But anyway, I said people will do what they've been conditioned to do and come what may. And then I'm quoting some Buddhist stuff. You only lose what you cling to. Non-attachment is not indifference, and that can be a Stoic thing as well. And quote, our journey is about being more deeply involved in life and less attached to it. And that's attributed to Ram Dass. And then another one, live life less out of habit and more out of intention. That's a Buddhist perspective there. And I think that's good advice, basically. Simply put, I mean, since you as an individual can't do anything to stop the acceleration of our collapse, you can maybe find some wisdom in the world to adhere to. So the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, wasn't a Buddhist. Marx wasn't a Marxist. Jesus, Yeshua, wasn't a Christian. Muhammad was a Muslim, one who submits, or so he says. And I said, or so he says, because what does one submit to? And of course, ultimately it's God, but Muhammad is God's only prophet and so on. And so there are other implications there. Hence, we have different sects of Islam, not just one, and so many different sects of Christianity and doctrines, not just one. So labels capture us because we've lost our intimate relationship with nature, living systems, and the place they inhabit. But it's interesting, even if you have an intimate connection to nature and you're living in ancient or a long time ago in Arizona or whatever, in the Pueblo cultures, and you have some drought and you can't eat anymore, you might just become cannibals. And there's lots of evidence that happened, that people started eating each other. And maybe you would start eating people from the other tribe first before you started eating your family members, your in-group. And there's evidence for that. So you can live in harmony with nature until nature throws you a curveball, and then you're in trouble. So is there any way we can find a balance between our scientific and engineering knowledge of nature and also how to preserve it and live in harmony with it? That's why we talk about various kinds of farming and so on, permaculture. Look, we can't do it at this scale. We can't do it if we're going to fight wars over resources that we need to grow economies the way we do now. It's not going to happen. So I say, it's not your fault. It's not difficult to continue learning, growing, and doing meaningful things while embracing reality and reestablishing your awareness of your place within living systems. Or at least you can just acknowledge that you're not all that you're not an individual that's independent of everything, and that there are natural living systems out there that are complex, and without them you wouldn't exist, and so on and so forth. You may hate your father, he's a bad guy, you vilify him, you never met him, you hate his guts, but here you are, able to vilify your father who you don't even know, or whatever, something like that. We can point fingers at this and that person, but we're all in the same boat, and we owe our life to life. Life begets life. So I say, love life. Come lovers of living and champions of life, in new days for giving and revelries rife. So we can forgive, and we can still have fun, and we can still enjoy the champagne and the band while the shit hits the fan, and rearrange deck chairs, because we got to do something. So if we want to advocate for a different economic system or whatever, we can do that. We can work for it. We can try to fire all the assholes who are robbing us blind. We can participate in a revolution or whatever the hell we want to do. If we want to do it, we got to do something. Or we can just stick with business as usual and come what may, see what happens. So if you're not utterly bereft, which means abandoned and tragically so, living on the street, no friends, no support, if you're not totally bereft and completely helpless, find some lovers of living. Look for people who are positive and do interesting things and so on. Embrace them and continue living your life. And that goes back to my last video. I'm talking about vanity. It doesn't hurt to pat someone on the back and give them the attention they so desperately need. But I wouldn't give attention to idiots and assholes who are just in it for the status and the money and just the ego, right? People need love and support and attention. But if they're just attention seekers, vain, hubristic, arrogant assholes like Donald Trump, don't pay any attention to them. They're not worthy of your attention. So we live in a destructive culture even though we don't notice it. Civilization crushes life, and and in my other post on Medium, I changed this around to make it make more sense, because I put this negative stuff at the bottom. But civilization does crush life. It's a demonstrable scientific fact. And there's so many lines of evidence for how it destroys the ocean. It destroys, it's ecocidal. It's omnicidal. And it crushes people. Like the people in Mogadishu. You don't care, but they're just human beings like you. They have a different culture, a different way of life, but they're just people. They love their children. They love their mom. What's the point of going in there and wrecking their world? Well, we have to have economic growth. We have to be number one. We have to have, season tickets to the NFL and all of that stuff, cool stuff. And we're all that. So people in the world just have to make sacrifices. In the old days, it was slavery, and we have to take slaves and whatnot. It's never been a just world, but it bends towards justice, because after the Treaty of Westphalia or something or another, everything got better, Enlightenment and the Magna Carta. So it bends towards, but at the same time, it crushes it. So we're in overshoot. We're in a state of collapse. Go figure. All of this great stuff. We need data centers. We need AI. We need crypto. We got to mine. We got to have smart contracts. We got to have more NVIDIA chips. We got to fight for that. We got to control the technology and the industry of refining rare earths in China. It has to be Anglo-controlled. Otherwise, the world's going to go to hell. It's satanic. So if you're suffering terribly, make another effort to reach out for support. Find ways to heal and express yourself. Someone out there gives a shit. Someone cares. Okay, so thank you for listening. Take good care. Buliam T. out.